Alright, so now it's time for us to create our elements for our character's body. So remember, our character have layers of accessories and props on his body. So he has leather clothing, he has fur, and he also, on top of that, has armor. Now you have to think about what is the very first element that's actually touching the skin. And that's going to be the very first thing that you're going to create. And the armor is going to be the last that we're going to be creating, because that's going to be the last thing that's on top of everything else. Because you don't want to be doing the armor first and then later on find out when you add the clothing and the leather and everything and the fur, it doesn't fit as properly as possible. Yeah, do the first element that's actually touching the skin. All right. So in our case, we're going to just first create our leather pants, okay? And then later we're going to be creating our fur, all right? And on top of the pants, there's also another type of clothing, like some kind of skirt thing. And we're going to do all that, all right, later. But yeah, let's start out with the pants. The way we're going to do the pants is we're going to extract out, we're going to work from a low poly mesh, okay? So remember, we have a retopologized mesh, which is right here, which is the low poly version of our high-res mesh. This is our high-res mesh right here. See, it's a lot of polygons right there. So this is the one with the details. Yeah, we don't really want to extract out some meshes from this high-res mesh because it's just going to lag Blender, because our orc has quite a lot of details here. And it's really high resolution. And so that's the reason why I have retopologized this, so that I retopologized the high-res mesh. That way we could just work from our low poly, and we're going to be creating our base meshes for our armor, our base mesh for our clothing, all from our low poly mesh here. But before we do that, we need to just make a copy of our low poly mesh, and we also need to rename it. I'm just going to rename this one orc_LP for low poly. And this one, I'm just going to go and name it orc_HP for high poly. Alright, so let's make a copy of our low poly mesh. And the reason why we need to make a copy of this is because when we create our pants, we're going to have to delete parts of the character's body, alright? And we don't really we want to be able to keep all of our new topology here, alright? So it's important that you have another copy of this, the original version, so everything is intact on that original version. But yeah, let's make a copy. Shift D to make a copy, right click. And I'm gonna hide the original version. So all that's showing now is just this copy here, orc_LP 0.001. And I'm just gonna turn off my wireframe. But for this copy, let's go to our scope mode and let's go to our lasso tool. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and just move this to how it was before. I'm gonna turn on X for symmetry. Let's select part of our character's lower body, where we know our pants is gonna be. Alright, so we know that's where our leather pants is gonna be. Probably, yeah, something like that. And let's go Control I to invert. And let's go to mask, slice, and fill host. Alright. So that removed the upper body and the feet. So this is the reason why I was telling you guys to make a copy of the low poly mesh, alright? Because we will be doing stuff like this where we're going to be removing certain areas of the character's full body. Just so we could have just something to work with for the pants, or maybe fur or something like that, alright? Or even for the shoes. But yeah, so this is what we have. And I'm just gonna go ahead and name it right away. Let's rename it right away so we are not getting confused here. I'm gonna call it pants. And we could also change the color of this. If I go to my material, yeah, so it's actually using the same material for our original low poly mesh. I'm just gonna remove that material, and it automatically turns like gray color. So I guess I'll just leave it like that for now. And now we could just turn on our orc original low poly that has the body and our original mesh intact, and we could just scale up our pants. Yeah, so I'm gonna select my pants and just scale it up. Alright, and we could go to our sculpt mode for our pants, and let's go to one of our brushes, maybe the clay strip brush, and then we go to our remesh. So for the voxel size, we got to remesh this, all right? And since we have scaled this to real world size, the voxel size that you were using before is not going to work. It's going to be different from, the effects are going to be different from how you first started out, okay? Because remember, when we first sculpting our character, it was, you know, we didn't really think about real world size. You were just sculpting it right away. But since we have already gone through the process of setting our character to real world size, the values that we are going to put in will be different. We don't have to crank up the amount too high or too low. So yeah, just keep that in mind. And for this here, we have to mess around with it. We don't want to put such a low value because that means it's going to be like a lot of resolution. So we could just put maybe a higher value since it is real world size. Maybe 3. Actually, not 3. I'm going to set it to like 8. I think 3 is still too much. So I put like 8 feet there. And I'm just going to remesh that. And you can see right there, it's low poly. And I'm going to go use my inflate brush. Bring down the intensity for the inflate brush. Some more. Okay. And just going to bring out the mesh for the pants. There you go. Something like that. Of course, if it's too low poly, we could go ahead and bring it down a bit. The remesher value and remesh it. And probably 3. There you go. Yeah, so. I'm just kind of smoothing it. There you go. So we just want like a little bit of base mesh going. And probably using the draw sharp, I'm just gonna kind of cut that area out. And I'm gonna hide my low poly here. And I'm going to just kind of scrape this area. There you go, scrape that. Using the scrape brush, flatten that a bit. And then I'm gonna remesh that. Okay, cool. Alright, great. And maybe I could use my grab brush to bring that down. So not thinking too much of the details, just so that we have something there to work with for the leather pants. And another thing that we could do is we could create our character has this type of clothing here, clothing piece, like ripped fabric clothing. I think that's fabric. We'll see what we could add there later, but now we just need to think about the basic shape of that. Okay, so maybe for that one, what we could do is yeah, for that we could go to object mode. So still got the pants selected here, and I can make a copy of that. Shift D to make a copy, and I'm gonna go ahead and rename this one skirt. Right, and I'm gonna go ahead and just hide my pants for now. Alright, so pants are hidden, but we just have a copy, which is gonna be, it's already called skirt. And gonna go ahead and go to my sculpt mode. I'm gonna go to my box mask and mask out this area, maybe up to here. Okay, and I'm gonna go to mask slice with holes. Alright, so we just have something like that. Okay, and then we could go to our clay strip brush or any of your brushes, and I'm gonna start out with a voxel size of 4 and remeshed. And I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of mask this out. Mask this out, and then Control I. All right. Okay, and gonna go to the move brush, go to mask, actually go to sculpt and set pivot to mask border. That way we could gonna just move it down. All right, maybe up to something like, yeah, like this. Okay. Then could go to scale. And I'm actually gonna turn off my mirror for this one, and I'm gonna go do mask border again and scale. Uh-oh. All right. I think. Okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and mask that. I'm gonna remesh that. I think it's best for us to just use our turn on symmetry and then use our inflate brush to just inflate that. And of course remeshed. And I'm gonna go to my smooth brush and just crank up my smoothing a little bit. Alright, so something like that. So we know he has like some kind of skirt on there. Okay, and we want to give a little bit of, actually for this one, for the skirt, and the pants are there, okay, and we want to make the skirt pop out a little bit more, probably bring down the intensity of that. Okay, bring down the intensity of the inflate brush. And remember, it looked a little bit ripped, his pants, his skirt. I'm gonna turn off symmetry as I do this. Yeah, turn off symmetry, and for this one I'm just gonna go ahead and move some of this area. So we just gonna want like some sharpness in there. So remember, we're not really taking too much of the details. We just want kind of like a basic shape there going. Later on, what we're going to be doing is we're going to create our much more detailed version. But right now, just thinking about this actual silhouette of the skirt. Okay. And remesh that. And of course I could probably add a little slit there. There you go. So there's like some kind of division in there. Alright. Okay, so I'm not really worried too much about that. Okay. There we go. So we don't want him to have look like he has thick hips. At the same time, we want to make sure that the pants are not sticking out of the skirt. And we could also go to the pinch brush to just kind of pinch this area so it's a little sharper. Alright. And we could also just go ahead and add a little bit of more details here, like folds and stuff. And we could also remesh that. So this is going to be like a drop down fold because it's like kind of hanging on, and then we got a point of tension here, and then we got like a drop down folds going. Alright, so okay, and maybe add a little bit like that. We're gonna make this look a little bit more ripped later, but as long as we got a little bit of a basic shape going on, should be fine. Now another thing is we have to create like the fur. So we know that he has like a fur right here, and we also need like a leather gloves here. He's wearing leather gloves. So let's go start out with just creating our gloves. Yeah, that'll be easier. After that, we'll go to the fur. I'm gonna go back to object mode. All right, so we're gonna basically go through the same process. So we're gonna go to our arc low poly and we're gonna make a copy of that, okay? And we're gonna create a mesh for our base mesh for our gloves. All right, so let's make a copy of our character here. Shift D to make a copy and rename that right away. I'm gonna call this one gloves. Okay, and I'm gonna go to scope mode, then go to the lasso tool, turn on symmetry, and I'm gonna go think about up to where it ends. The gloves are gonna be right there. Okay, and I'm gonna press Ctrl I to invert, and then just go to mask and mask slice, fill holes. There you go. And of course, let's go to our material. Oh yeah, oops, material, and then remove the materials. So it's gonna be gray. All right. Okay, and what we can do is we could go to our one of our brushes, and let's go remesh this. I'm gonna start out with 5 and remesh that. There you go. And let me see how that looking. Yeah, so that's how it looks. I think I wanna remesh it to 4. Remeshed. Okay, good. And I'm gonna go to my inflate brush and just go ahead and inflate this. I think my inflate brush is a little too high. I'm gonna bring down intensity. And I'm gonna go to my smooth brush. The smooth brush is too much. I want to be able to smooth it, but at the same time, I don't really want to have it melt down. So yeah, bring it down, something like that. All right, so inflate. Okay. Okay, I have a little issue with this one because, as you can see, we have the meshes here kind of like sticking together. You can see it's sticking, yeah, around the finger area. That's because we're working with a really low poly mesh, but we're going to rectify that after we increase the value for our voxel remesher. All right, but we just want to have something there to work with. We might even just take a different route later for our gloves. What we could also do, maybe we could go to our low poly mesh and then just make a copy of this, duplicate it, and just create the details from there. But right now we want to have kind of something there to work with for our gloves. That way we kind of have a visual presentation of how everything's going to fit in together with our gloves, our fur on top, and then our armor on top. All right, so this is kind of like what is being done also with concepting, where you just do like a quick base mesh for your character design, and you go and change things, and you can easily manipulate your idea here or the overall design quickly without worrying too much about the geometry, topology, or anything like that. Just overall the visuals. Just trying to see how it would all fit in. Okay, so that's gonna be the gloves, and also there's gonna be fur right here. Okay, there's gonna be some fur there. So I guess we could go ahead and do that already. Yeah. So what we could do is, for this one, we go to object mode. So we still have our gloves there. So we could make a copy of the gloves. Right click. And I'm gonna hide the original gloves. and then gonna go to sculpt mode, going to mask out this area, and then Control I, and mask, slice, fill holes. There you go. So this is like something of a base that we can work with for our fur to see exactly where our fur is going to be laid on later. And of course, we gotta go ahead and remesh that. I'm just gonna remesh that right away. There you go. And just gonna smooth it. And of course, using the inflate brush, could turn on our make sure, let's rename it right away. I'm gonna call this one fur glove. That's gonna be the fur kind of near the glove area. And I'm gonna turn on my gloves and just go ahead and sculpt this area out. All right. So we're trying to see exactly where the fur is going to be laid. Later on for our fur, we are going to be using hair particle system, but kind of like the same thing what we did with the hair. We just kind of create like a basic shape for hair. So if you guys remember, we have just this for our hair, just so we have a visual presentation of how it's gonna look like. Okay, this looks a little weird. We could adjust that later, the object properties for our character's body. We're gonna deal with that later, but right now I just want to focus on this. So yeah, it's good to have exactly like a base mesh of how our fur is gonna look like initially, just so that we know how the shape will be. And if we need any changes, then we could make that already. I'm gonna actually put this to a lower resolution, maybe 2, and then remesh that. Probably could press dot, num lock. Probably could bring that up a bit. And maybe we could even add a few visual information here and there. Just sometimes putting a few visual presentation for the actual fur and how it's gonna be laid on here in a different direction will let us know what else we need to modify further here. Okay, so something like that. And then of course we gotta make our fur also for our shoulder area, like around here. So for that one, could just select our character's body, our original LP version, and we could also, what we could do, this is going to be an easier way. Let's go hit the tab key. We could Shift Z on our keyboard, and we could go to our select lasso. We could select a mesh, part of a mesh, yeah, maybe around this area. Okay. Maybe here, maybe like this. Think about how much is going to be covered by the fur, something like that. All right. Let's go ahead and duplicate the faces. Shift D to make a copy of the faces. Right click and press P as in Paula on your keyboard and separate by selection. There you go. And we can hit the tab key and there is the new extraction, and we can go ahead and just rename that right away. I'm going to call this one fur shoulder. There you go. Okay, now I'm gonna go into my material and just remove that material so it's not gonna be purple. Okay, so a proper way to extrude this is let's select all our polygons and let's press Alt-E on our keyboard, Alt-E, and then you're gonna see some options here for extruding. Click extrude along normals and then just go drag your mouse up. There you go. Maybe something like this. You want a little thickness. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Now we go ahead to our sculpt mode and let's remesh this, shall we? So let's go to our voxel size. I'm gonna set it to maybe 4 and then remesh that and smooth it. I think I want it a little bit higher so it's lower poly. Remesh that so it's gonna be easier to manipulate. And I'm gonna crank up my smoothing a little bit. Okay. I don't want it to get to the point where it becomes too thin, because when the geometry becomes too thin here using the remesher, you're going to start to see some holes. Alright, so something like that, and we want to kind of just move it down. So remember, on top of this fur is going to be the armor, alright? So you don't really want the fur to be way too thick, because when you have a heavy armor on top of the fur, it's gonna flatten it a little bit, okay? There you go. And maybe taking this up a bit, taking this up, remesh. I'm gonna set this to 5 and remesh that. Just gonna go ahead and just look like add a little sharpness so it looks like basic shape of fur. Yep. And also something like this, just using the grab brush, just do this here and remesh that. I'm going to, before I remesh, I'm gonna bring it down to maybe voxel size 3 and just remesh that. Alright, so we got a little something there. Probably could smooth it out a little bit. Right. Maybe you could move this up a bit. And then maybe I could add just a little bit of kind of like what I've done with this here, just a little bit of indication of some fur. Kind of just bring it down though. Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna add a little bit here. It's good to have some visual information to work with, so if we need to kind of adjust the shape a bit, we could kind of do that already. But we're not really gonna see much of it until we, yeah, something like that. Gonna move that down, probably that down. There you go. Yeah, so as I'm actually sculpting this here, I'm already also thinking about exactly how the armor is going to look like, because we are going to be creating our armor here. Okay, armor there. We're also going to lay armor right on top here. So I'm thinking about those things as I'm sculpting this. But yeah, for now we do have the basic shapes for some of the elements already for the outfit.